discussing outcomes monitoring and the use of data. Prior to coming to New Zealand 6 years ago, Sian studied in Mauritius for a year, learning endangered species recovery, and since then she has been in the conservation realm, working for DOC on the predator-free Wellington project, and now for Wildlands Consultants Limited. Her expertise is in pest animal control, and in particular rats. So welcome, Sian. Okay. Yep.
Cool, thank you very much. So I'm basically here to talk to you about monitoring. I'll try my best in giving you as much information. It might be sucking eggs for some of you, just to go with the basics. But yeah, so essentially I came from the Predator-Free Wellington project, which is an eradication project down in Wellington, first city to become predator-free or trying to become predator-free. They started out in Miramar Peninsula, and they're still there 4 years later, still trying to learn, still trying to understand what's going on and how to get those remaining rats, because those are the last species, pest species to be eradicated. And as Melissa said in her earlier talk, it's quite different to suppression versus eradication. Eradication, you do have to throw the kitchen sink at it. And you really do have to think outside the box. So some of the things that I'll talk to you today about is quite different to what you might have seen or dealt with before. So I'm just going to cover a few points here for you. Why is it important to monitor in the first place? How to choose the right type of monitoring as well, and type of tools that you can use. Got a few pictures, not as many as the previous presenter, which was great, but there you go, I'll talk your ear off instead. Daily monitoring at devices and in the community, which we all seem to be coming back to, which is super important. So why is monitoring important in the first place? Monitoring can answer a bunch of questions. You've got to be thinking about these questions to even begin with the start of monitoring. So what kind of species living in the area, or what's the population size of the species in the area? And then looking into, does my pest management action plan actually evaluate whether you're successful or failing at controlling pests? So those are some of the questions you've got to be thinking about before you even start. Without asking these, you'll never really know whether your decisions are going well or going wrong, and the effectiveness of it as well. So do you need to do more? Do you need to do less? Is there different types of pest control that you need to do? So for comparison purposes as well, you need to think about doing some monitoring prior to your actions, because then you can do a good comparison of whether you're successful or failing, and then try and use different ways of monitoring. So how to choose the right type of monitoring? There's some more questions to ask yourself, is the type of behavior and habitat of the pest species you're targeting. This can be different types of species depending on the way they live. So the habitat. Your method of choice may also be influenced by whether you're monitoring multiple at the same time or whether you're just monitoring one. For example, possums. Possums can have 3 types of different monitoring. You can have leg hold traps, you can have wax tags, and you can have chew cards. Whereas monitoring ungulates, forest ungulates in particular, you can do there's only really one option, it's fecal pellet counts. Everything else is pretty difficult to undertake. So just things to think about: is the species diurnal, nocturnal, crepuscular, which I love that word, it's a great word. So for example, rats are nocturnal, so your best option is to try different types of methods that will base around them being nocturnal and how you're going to monitor at night. The other types of things are, what vegetation do they prefer? Are they forests, dunes, scrubland, tussocks, farmlands? We all know rabbits like to be out in the open eating grass, so farmlands for them is probably the best place to start if you're going to try and find out how many rabbits are in the area. Are they active in trees or on the ground? You've got ship rats that like to crawl around up in the trees, but then you've got Norway rats that are much larger and actually more ground-based. So you've got to think about those as well. What kind of vegetation do they prefer in terms of dense or open? Again, rats like quite dense cover, so you've got to think about where you're putting your monitoring there. And do they live in groups or are independent? So wallabies tend to hang out in groups, geese as well, but as soon as you shoot a geese, they're all going to fly off. So, think about these things. Are they going to be all collaborative in one area, or are they going to be on their own, and what are you targeting? So monitoring tools, I'm sure you've all used or seen a bunch of these before. All of them are pretty useful. There's also more than this as well that I'm sure people have used. The trail cameras, fantastic tool, quite expensive. But for what they're used for, you can find out whether your pest target species are actually shy in the first place. You can put up a camera up at a trap. If you see something try and go in and then disappear, it's not going to be going in at any point in time. The other thing is that it allows you to understand the behavior of the animal. So, for example, when I was working at Predator-Free Wellington, we had cameras set up at different types of devices that we were implementing. So, Nova Coil, for example, was a big tube, and we just put some bait in there, and it took weeks for a rat to even try and go inside. And that's just because they were getting used to a new device. But we understood that behavior and how long it took just by looking at camera footage and spending time and effort into setting those up in the first place to understand if it's going to work. There actually is software available as well if you don't want to sit there trawling through your camera footage that allows you it detects basically the species you're targeting on its own, and it will show up. If you've got 1,000 pictures, it might pop up with saying that you've got 300 pictures of rats because it's done itself. You just put it through the system, and then it's found those themselves, and then you don't have to trawl through every single one, so you can just look through what you're looking for. So that's really super helpful for time and effort going into looking at trail camera data. The other thing is tracking tunnels, super useful. There's some pictures up there for you of a couple of different comparative tracks. You've got the mouse one on the left, and then mouse one on the left, and then geckos as well. So you can see that in one picture you've got lots of little mice running around, and the other, it's actually, your control's actually working because you've got gecko prints, which is really awesome. The tracking tunnels are basically lure it in the middle and you get tracks on a card, which is really great. The cool thing about those as well is that you can actually come up with a concept. For example, Predator-Free, we had to come up with a concept of what is using our devices. We're finding that our bait stations were completely wiped out, empty of bait. It's like, oh, what is eating it? Can't always be rats, surely. So we basically invented a small card that could be placed inside a bait station that would detect prints, and then you could see what was using our bait, or what was eating our bait. If you couldn't see any poo inside or anything like that, well, how do you know what it is? So that was our answer to that question, was put some cards in a bait station instead of just doing it in an actual tunnel. And that actually worked really well. It gave us a better understanding of what was using it. So the other things were DTEX. Don't know if anyone's heard of DTEX before. Anyone? That's really cool. DTEX. DTEX is basically a non-toxic lure. It looks like a block of poison block, but it's a different color. So you can nail it to anything that you want, knowing that nothing's going to get harmed. It smells a bit like cinnamon. It's a light brown color, and basically you can, the animal that you're targeting, or if you're trying to get at rats in the first place, you put it up high up in a tree, for example. Essentially, when the animal eats the DTEX, they will poo pellets that are brightly colored when you have a UV light on them. So it sounds kind of weird, and I'll show you a picture. So that middle picture there, you've got a light on it, and then you can see it's bright blue, shines up quite bright. So when you're targeting a species and you're down to the last, what you think is a couple of hundred or one or two or whatever you're trying to get it down to, and you're down to that few animals, this kind of solution is great, because it basically means you can follow a trail, because the rats, if, for example, chew it with their hands, or paws I should say, not hands, they'll hold it and it's a little bit crumbly and they'll run off to where they live. and you can follow a whole trail of where they're pooing and where they're walking to, and you can follow it right to their cache, which is kind of cool. It's kind of new technology that the Predator-Free Wellington project is trialing, and it's really good for targeting those individual species that you think is remaining in that area. And then yeah, you can then set up a load of traps and where you think it's living, and then hopefully you catch it the next day. Wax tags and chew cards, got a good example there of rat chew. They're great just for identifying chew marks, presence or absence of a species, multiple species. You've got to look pretty hard, but you can usually tell if there's rat chew and mice chew at the same time. They're used for lots of different species. What the project found, Predator-Free project found, was rats, if you put them out for too long, rats will actually lick the core flute, the peanut butter out of the core flute. So then you're not getting any chew marks, and then you think, oh, you're cunning little. Now you've got to try and come up with a different type of monitoring, because yeah, they were so used to, down in Wellington, they're so used to those cards. We were putting them out every day, and they got so used to them that they were just licking the peanut butter, and you kind of go, bugger, now what are we going to do? So yeah, just trying to think on the spot, trying to think of different ideas. And we always used to say no idea is stupid, because we need to think of something. It's a project that's never been done before, and so people are constantly coming up with ideas, and it's really good for creativity and innovations. So yeah, if you put out chew cards for too long, just bear that in mind, that just because something's not chewing it doesn't mean it's not there. And then the other one is traps. Basically what you're trapping is what you got in the area. You might trap one thing, but actually you'll probably have a whole another population around as well. So you know if you're trapping rats, there's going to be more rats around. And it's just a good way of understanding as well if you want to do sort of dissections and stuff of what they're eating and all sorts of things like that. So that's really good to know what's happening. And as I said, with monitoring, sometimes you're putting out this monitoring stuff, and then you actually realize that over time you're starting to get native species on your chew cards or on your tracking tunnels, and it's kind of cool when you see that change. So yeah, keep an eye out on those things. Just that picture there with the rat on top of the motor lure, that's a mayonnaise motor lure that Zip used. That is what we put in front of our trail cameras, and it was super helpful. We also got a lot of cat interaction, so bear that in mind, that you might have some cats that come past and lick the mayonnaise as well. So basically 1 ml of mayonnaise gets dispensed every day, and then hopefully you attract what you're targeting. So I'd like to encourage everyone, because obviously you're all here doing some sort of predator control, everyone to do daily monitoring. You don't have to use tools necessarily. You can do it at your device itself. So for example, you can identify any droppings that are left behind. That picture there is a bait station that was completely wiped clean. Our rule of thumb was if a bait station's wiped clean, it's usually a rat, because they lick all the crumbs up and all that kind of stuff, whereas mice leave little bits of crumbs everywhere. So that's some signs that you can look for, but that in particular, they left droppings, and it's rat droppings. And then you can see as well in that picture that there's a tracking tunnel in the bait station. So that was really cool. You could see as well that there was quite a big population going in and out using that device. So the tricky one with identifying fecal matter is sometimes it looks real similar. So that comparison of, okay, you got wetter poo and rat poo, super similar. So one thing is successful and one thing's not, because you're trying to get rid of the rats. But if you see that there's a poo that looks the same, the only difference is basically the shape at the end, each end of the poo. So wetter poo is very rounded, rat poo is very lengthy at the end, let's just say, trails off. So those types of details, as gross as it is, you know, we'd be picking it up, looking in detail to see, wait, is this a good thing or a bad thing? And a lot of the time, it was rat, unfortunately, in the bait stations. But you know, I once found some poo on a tree, and it was actually wetter, and it was really cool because I was panicking it was a rat, and it wasn't. And it was just really cool that you can start looking around the surroundings of your device to give you a picture of what's happening. So the other things are also looking at chew marks. So chew marks don't necessarily have to be on chew cards. They can also be, you know, on trees. nearby, just like the previous pictures. There's chew marks from deer and all sorts on trees. You can see possum chew marks, scratches. We actually had some cheeky rats that would chew the actual bait station, which was kind of annoying, but you go, okay, right. And so there's, just look around, look at where there's chewing going on that's not necessarily at the card, the chew mark, the chew card, or the, you know, whatever it may be. One thing is, especially if there's pest plant species around, like banana passion fruit, for example, that fruits every year. If you go and have a look at all the banana passion fruit on the ground and look at the chew marks on those, you'll see whether it's birds or rats. So, you know, putting a bait station in that kind of area would be really beneficial to know what's happening. The other thing is looking for caches. So there was one that was kind of obvious in that bait station and that photo. And they're all Caro seeds, I believe. And that was just a greedy rat, and look how many seeds it gathered. You can look for those by also looking for run-throughs. So for rats in particular, you'll see signs of them going using the same pathway. So you might see like a little tunnel through the bush on the ground, low down, and then from there you could actually follow it if you wanted to and find the cache and see what they've been eating. And then you also know where to put your device. So just look for those minor details, and then you might end up putting a device in a better location, which will help you catch what you're wanting to catch. So just on the last one, we'll refer back to community. And it is all about the community. You've got to get community buy-in to even be successful, in my opinion. So things to help with the buy-in would be, for example, sharing that data that you've got of how many catches you've managed to get that year, or doing 5-minute bird counts every year or every 5 years or whatever it may be. I know Predator Free do it every year, and the recent data that I saw was that P Waka Waka increased by 550%, which is huge. And people start to notice as well. The community start to talk to you and let you know, oh, I've had this bird in my garden, this bird, I've never seen them in my garden before. And when they start talking about those things, you know that they're engaging, they're keen for you to keep doing the work that you're wanting to do. So that kind of stuff is great. You've got pitfall traps for insects and skinks and lizards. And then you've got to think about the graphs and what you're going to show. When you do a presentation like this one, you know, graphs, pie charts, whatever you want to show that it's working will help with that community buy-in. And then you might get volunteers to help the work as well. There's big groups of volunteers around, like yourselves, all here helping out, and you know it's making a difference. And to show people that you're wanting to make a difference and the work that you're putting into this is making a difference is what's going to get people involved. And building those relationships as well. You don't have to necessarily get people to do the work, but you could actually offer someone a bait station or a trap. You know, door knock, see if they're interested. You could let them know that you're going to do it yourself and you will deal with the dead body. Because I know a lot of people don't like to deal with dead bodies. It is a bit grim at times, but if you're encouraging and engaging with the local community, and you're offering the services, they will be like, yeah, why not? Come into my garden, put a bunch of traps there. If it means I get more birds and I do nothing and all I do is let you in my garden, sweet as, you know? So yeah, getting that community involved is vital. I don't think you can do it without them, and I don't think you can do anything either without volunteers. So thank you to you all, and that's it. I went a bit quick because I was thinking about lunch. Thank you.
Questions?
Anyone got any questions? They can come grab me later. Maybe not during lunch.
Questions? Yes. At the back there. I will get you to use the mic.
Kia ora. Thanks a lot, Sian. That's awesome. My name's Craig Sian. I'm from Farnell. Just a question about the rat monitoring and showing the differences between Norway and ship rat. For your ship rat monitoring, do you have a suggestion for that? Up on trees?
Placing your actual chew cards and wax eggs up higher would be better. I mean, you could go as high as you want. You've got to think about the connection between the trees as well. If it's big pine trees, you might struggle getting up there. But yeah, so if you're looking at dense bush, we used to put them, head height easily, because they can just go from one tree to another when all the roots and everything and all the tree branches are connected to each other. So they could go anywhere, really. So just lifting everything higher off the ground, because also we found things like cats and Norway rats would be chewing, and rabbits would be chewing our cards on the ground. So yeah, just lifting it higher, you're avoiding that. Bear in mind as well, birds, if you're increasing if you've done a really good job with pest control, bird life increases, and we found that cute little silver eyes will also eat the peanut butter out of the corflute. So when you're doing it, pop it in somewhere with dense cover, preferably dense cover that maybe be out of sight or out of the way of birds that can get that peanut butter as well.
Sure.
All right.